Chair.
I call Rino Tirikatene.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to take a call on the committee stage of this Dairy Industry Restructuring Amendment Bill. And, sir, I want to really focus on the core provisions of what we're doing with this piece of legislation. And it's all about, as my colleague Joanne Luxon said, providing certainty for our South Island dairy farmers, the whole dairy sector. And if we look at Clause 4 in Part 1, it really goes to the heart of it, because subparts 5 and 5A of Part 2 of the DERA legislation, those provisions have been activated by under the 2001, the principal legislation. So once, and that was because the market threshold, which was set in the legislation at 20%, had been assessed to be in excess of that. And so we had all of these legislative triggers that had been activated, which led to the Minister requesting that the Commerce Commission produce a report, and it also activated, they did a very fine report, and in fact, sir, the Commerce Commission felt that there was sufficient competition. It wasn't, and it wasn't quite ready. The industry wasn't quite ready for full deregulation. And so that's what we're doing here today, is ensuring that the provisions of DERA, the DERA regulations, which has been in place since 2001, will continue for all farmers in the South Island and processors as well. So let us think, what would happen had we not passed this legislation? It would throw the entire dairy sector of the South Island into disarray, because the provisions of subparts 5 and 5A are very far-reaching. As I said, it's activated a process, a trigger points, and the cancellation, basically, of the regulations which have long applied. So what we would do in one fell swoop, by failing to pass this legislation, is throw all of the dairy sector into disarray. They would not know whether they would be obliged, who would collect their milk, whether they would still be able to apply for open entry into Fonterra, whether they would be still entitled to be able to give 20% of their milk supply to a different processor. And so the reasons why we are doing this is, as I've said, it's very important that we maintain the status quo, that we provide certainty for our South Island farmers, and as it states here in repealing the provisions of the expiry, which are imprinted into subparts 5 and 5A, we need to ensure that those provisions don't come into effect. So indeed, as I've mentioned, the status quo can remain. Our farmers of the South Island can be at ease, can wake up in the morning and, as they do, and get to work on their farms, and they will know exactly what will be taking place. Now, sir, that's not to say that change is not on the horizon, and that's why there is, running parallel to this piece of legislation, there will be a review being carried out. And as the Commerce Commission said, sir, there needs to be a pathway to deregulation, but that needs further discussion, further consultation with all of the industry, because, again, these are big issues that need to be discussed. Setting the right thresholds, again, based on the Commerce Commission's recommended 30% threshold, effectively, again, the status quo should remain, because currently Fonterra's supply that they don't have is around 24%. So it's really important that we pass this legislation. We started it under urgency. It's really important that we continue that process so we can, again, provide comfort, certainty to the South Island dairy sector, but also parallel to this, we will continue the path, have full consultation with the sector to ensure that there is a clear pathway to deregulation which will occur, and that will provide a larger picture for our dairy sector in the future. But for the time being, sir, it's very important that this legislation, the triggers that are in place, are cancelled so the status quo can remain.
I call